countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, it is now time for more of the Last Comic Shop Podcast!
And one of our goals when we started this thing was to open the tent up for all those people that are going to the movies and seeing all these comic book heroes and giving you things you can pair with it. So it's not necessarily a comic book hero per se, but whatever. We're going to do that thing. So,
what do you mean it's not a comic book hero? He's definitely a comic book hero, at least nowadays.
He rounds up to a comic book hero, right?
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. If you play the law of averages and you stack the books, I think he's got more hero books than villain books. And that's sad, as I'll get to in a second. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith, as well as the wonderful George from Shortbox Summary, who is pinch hitting for J.A. Scott this week for our All Venom Spectacular. That's right.
I'm J.A. Oh, I'm in the Philippines. I like Conan. Oh no. It's my J.A. impression.
It's like he's there.
Krakoa.
All right. But yeah, it is an all Venom show in honor, I guess, of the closing of Tom Hardy's time as Venom. He said he's not going to do this anymore, but he did a third movie, which we'll get to later on in the show. But as Chad pointed out, on these movie review shows, we often want to make sure that folks that are coming out of those movie theaters can go to a local comic book shop. They can pick up something that stars those characters in the comic books. And boy, howdy, do we got a great one for this week. Chad, what are we reading this week?
So we are diving into the Donny Cates run of Venom. The collection we were looking at came out in 2019. And it contained the first 12 issues and introduced a guy by the name of Knull. And there's lots of symbiotes and spirally, smiley face weirdness and Eddie Brock with a beard.
Yeah. And speaking of this particular 12-issue run, George, who worked on these 12 issues?
Oh, man, so many people. This book was written by Donny Cates. It was penciled by Ryan Stegman predominantly, but also Ivan Coelho and Joshua Cassera tagged in for a couple issues. It was inked by J.P. Mayer, inked by Ivan Coelho as well, and also inked by Joshua Cassera. It was colored by Frank Martin and Andres Mosa, lettered by VC's Clayton Cowles, and Devin Lewis was the editor, Nick Lowe is the executive editor, and the assistant editors were Lauren Amaro, Tom Groneman, Emily Newcomen, and Danny Chasm.
That's a cool name, Danny Chasm.
I might have mispronounced it. It might be Kazim. It feels appropriate for the book, right?
Right. And what also feels appropriate for any episode of The Last Comic Shop is a 10-cent synopsis of what happens in these 12 issues. We're going to get that from Chad Smith. So, Chad, what happens in these 12 issues of Donny Cates writing about our favorite black Spider-Man suit guy?
Yeah, so at this point, the symbiote is back with Eddie Brock for reasons I don't remember or know, but that's okay. And it turns out that the symbiote, when it was teamed up with Flash Thompson, it was in love with Flash Thompson, and it's making Eddie Brock feel a little bit bad because Flash Thompson was so much better. So I really need to go back and read that Remender Flash Thompson Venom run.
That was good. That was real good.
There you go. But this starts off, and Eddie Brock meets a dude who's like, "You need to help me. All my military brothers who had symbiotes are all trapped, and you got to go find them and rescue them." And then Eddie's like, "Yeah, whatever." So he goes to do that thing, but it turns out all those guys are dead, and all those symbiotes are part of the symbiote god, and everything you knew about symbiotes was wrong because now they have wings and they fly around and they get spirals on their heads whenever their god is there, and they get real scared. And it's a lot of madness. And Eddie Brock has a little brother who's actually his son. And then there's a lot of other things that happen.
Yeah, but I do want to point out that this is Chad's pick this week. And as I recall, the reason why you wanted to read this is because you got an action figure and you thought it was so cool that you were like, I got to see where this action figure came from.
Wait,
right?
Did you get the Venom with the big wings?
Yes, I did.
Oh my god, that one is so cool.
It is. Yeah. And it shoots water, which, like, okay, that's a fun gimmick, but it's a translucent green Venom with wings, big stupid freaking wings. Oh, I love it.
Todd McFarlane, eat your heart out. Yeah.
Honestly.
So now that you have digested the 12 issues and Venom with wings, Chad, I gotta ask: is this really the first time Knull shows up, or was Knull introduced in like the Thor run on Donny Cates first? Yeah, like see,
wasn't Donny Cates who wrote that issue with Thor? That was a Jason Aaron joint. That was during the there was this thing that showed up and it was super weird and cool, and then no one talked about it. For 6 years.
The Necrosword.
Gore was right.
Hashtag Gore was right. Help him spread the movement, Chad. Assad Ribic on art on a monthly book. This is
beautiful
stuff. Nothing happened until this book, and it changed everything.
Everything.
So what I'm talking about is earlier on in the show, we reviewed when Thor becomes the Herald of Galactus. And he goes and fights the Winter, or and isn't that Knull? I thought that was Knull.
Now Knull will show up there, just like Knull shows up in Silver Surfer Black, another of the books, that we reviewed. But
so those were way after. This predate. Okay.
Yeah, Knull's first appearance, and it was big in the pandemic speculator boom, is that issue of Venom number 3. With the white cover and the giant teeth coming up, like
So all of the parts of this book where Knull fights Thor, later on, Donny Cates took those ideas and was like, "I want to tell that story now."
Yeah, that didn't happen yet. He's planting symbiote seeds.
Oh, I see.
It's confusing because it is literally the first scene in this comic is ancient Norsemen fighting Grendel, their version of Grendel from the Beowulf legend. But it's actually a symbiote. What can you do?
Not just a symbiote dragon.
That's a great point. You got me there, Chad. Yeah.
Well, since you guys now explain it all, now I can move on to what I thought of this book and my initial thoughts. And genuinely, I'm starting to really come around to Donny Cates' writing. Originally, there were times in which I thought it was a little bit excessive. I thought it, went in too many different directions. And when he transformed the Hulk into a spaceship, I thought that was kind of goofy. Maybe it was coming off of the Al Ewing, and it was completely a left turn from what Al Ewing was doing, and I was just like, this is too bananas. But I genuinely do like Donny Cates' writing. The only problem with Donny Cates' writing in this particular series is my bigger problem with the Venom character.
That he didn't have wings.
No, that ever since the mid-90s, when he became popular, all of a sudden it wasn't good enough for Venom just to be a super badass member of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. To me, there was absolutely nothing wrong with Venom being Spider-Man's equal but opposite. That is a very classic trope throughout all of comic books. It works every single time, and it fit, and it filled a hole in Spider-Man's universe that really did need to be filled.
Right. To piggyback, outside of classics like Rocket Racer or Grizzly.
Or human tarantula. Yeah.
Yes. Tarantula, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Not to be confused with Swarm, the human made out of bees.
Or Stegman. I know where you're going.
But yeah, so all of those had been previous editions of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery post the Steve Ditko era. But Venom was the first bad guy that, in my mind, really cracked that upper echelon. Like, he was not hanging out with Stegron. He was there with Doc Ock in terms of importance. He was there, with Green Goblin. As a matter of fact, when Venom first came out, it was the Harry Osborn Green Goblin who wasn't really sure of himself, and he was fighting Hobgoblin, and all that other stuff was going on. And Venom just filled that void as Spider-Man's number-one villain. And if you think about it, outside of like maybe Mr. Negative, have we had that many other editions that have really?
No. Mr. Negative hits it because he was featured very prominently in the Spider-Man video games.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is how a lot of people know Mr. Negative. But you're right. Mr. Negative is the first since Venom to really stick the landing.
Yeah. But still, yeah, as cool as Mr. Negative was, awesome look, fact that he's in a video game, whatever, and you think of Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Venom. It was like the holy trinity of like Spider-Man villains. And then all of a sudden he became super popular. He was, they wanted to put him all these books, and they were like, we have to turn him into a good guy. Or at least like, yeah, this is somebody we should root for or whatever. Nah, like this guy's terrible to people. And Donny Cates plays with that a little bit, but this book and trying to make fetch happen with Venom being a good guy. Like, they do it again. And Flash Thompson was fine with Venom being a good guy because that was a different Venom. That was a different character, and I was okay with that. But Eddie Brock Venom, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy.
To go back to action figures, my Venom figure in the 90s kept telling me, I want to eat your brain. That's not something a good guy does. Eat your brains. Eat your brains. They just kept hitting that button. Eat your brains.
So I'm going to get off my soapbox and let George, what did you think?
I took a lot of years off comics, and then it was DC Rebirth that actually got me back into the comic book shop. I was like reading Marvel, but like really I was a DC guy from like 2016 on, because I loved everything about Rebirth. And then the two books that really changed my mind on Marvel and made me go back were happening at the same time. It was Venom and Immortal Hulk. And I think this started a trend where like kind of continuously to this day, the best Marvel books are kind of horror books. Like I think the best book on the stands right now from Marvel is Hulk, where like that does feel like a continuation of Immortal Hulk, but it feels different because it feels more like a Southern Gothic horror story as opposed to just like a Gothic horror story, I guess. But like this Venom book, I love this book so much. This was like the first time I ever really read Donny Cates, and then like this into the Thor book, which I thought was incredible for Donny Cates' time on it before his unfortunate accident. And Venom is a character who, as much as I love him, and I'd even argue when you were talking about like the top three Spider-Man villains being Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Venom, I'm younger than you. So like I would actually say the top three Spider-Man villains, just in terms of like epicness to me, are Green Goblin, Venom, and probably Carnage, just because like that was such a big deal. I remember being 6 years old at the grocery store, seeing comic books with Carnage on it. And like that was all I remember seeing. And I was just like, oh, this seems like a big deal. And then watching the cartoons, and then like the Sega Genesis video game being like, oh, this is a big deal. And so like the symbiotes seem as important to the Spider-Man mythos as, I don't want to say Uncle Ben, but like a fourth pillar that like the building of Spider-Man is built on. So the fact that there was a Venom run that was reiterating established mythology and then changing it on the fly to this new thing, I thought this book was incredible. This is, I think, the best possible first run of Venom you could pick up. I never read Agent Venom, the Rick Remender stuff you're talking about with Flash. I had a couple random issues of like Lethal Protector from back in the 90s that I was reading as a kid, but like I don't know Venom. This is the Venom I know, and I absolutely adore this book.
So for me, I'm sitting there, I'm listening to George and talking about the importance of Carnage and the symbiotes, and like I'm shuddering just because I was there as Carnage was introduced, and just a lot of those initial additional symbiote stories. And it went from that into the Clone Saga into kind of like a dark period for me in terms of Spider-Man stuff, where it's like, oh, you're really drifting away from what makes this character great. Mm-hmm. And so I don't disagree with you that the symbiotes have that level of importance, but I also don't like it. But that's the kicker to me, because like Spider-Man as a character, should he be defined from an alien suit that he picked up on Secret Wars? And it's branched off into all these different things. And there have definitely been cool symbiote stories. But the more sci-fi you get with Spider-Man, the more I'm like, I like the teenager.
100,
the barbecue sauce.
100%, yeah.
But yeah, and not that there's anything wrong with it. Like different strokes for different folks and all that other stuff. And then you get to this story. And this is emblematic of Donny Cates for me. For a long time, I struggled with Donny Cates stuff because I would read it and I'd be like, I don't know if I like that or not, because it's really dumb. If you just say them out loud, you're like, that's a really stupid idea. But at the same time, Donny Cates and the artists he would work with, whether it was Trad Moore on Silver Surfer Black or whether it's Stegman and Quello here, like, they take these ideas that should be so dumb and they make them awesome. They find a way to tie them in and make them great. And so it was like me embracing the fact that I love 90s comic books again. And I love Donny Cates' storytelling and all the different things that on its base, like, do I think like having the whole planet of the symbiotes, I think that's kind of dumb in the first place. But he's like, no, that planet is actually a prison, and they're there to keep the symbiote god there. Like, what? What the hell are you talking about? But it works.
Right.
Well,
and that's the thing about Donny Cates' writing is it's tricky deep. What I mean by that is, like, at the surface, you're reading it and you're like, okay, he's telling the story about, giant venom dragons or whatever. But then you get, again, some of this interplay between Eddie Brock and his symbiote where they're genuinely, like, I don't want to say like in love with each other, but they kind of sort of are. Like, they're in a relationship with each other.
A way more codependent relationship than like any other writer had seen, where like they were using each other before, but like now they like need each other.
Yeah, he gets like superpowers because it reconnects with like the hive mind way back on Knull's planet or whatever, and then he loses that and he won't talk to him, but he's a dog. The Venom dog, it was kind of cool.
It was pretty good, yeah.
But it also was, again, tricky deep, because what a great way to explain the relationship between Eddie Brock and the symbiote than a man and his dog. We can all relate to like the relationships that we have with our four-legged friends and how they've been through us through thick and thin, and sometimes it's hard to talk to them or whatever, but they never leave you and they're always there to defend you. And
but even what you just said about like him being like dumb but deep. Oh yeah, no, he's a dog, so like it's a pet, it's subservient to man. It's like, yeah, but also it's man's best friend. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's little things like that where it's like you can read it 8 different ways, and you can almost like choose your own level of depth when it comes to the way Donny Cates wrote this. And I compared him to John Romita Jr. for writers. This stuff is all like rough but cool. Like, yeah. Like everything is like a little like, is that what you just said? And you're like, yeah, screw it, I'm gonna go with it. And then like if you go with it, then you're on the ride, and like everything just kind of works.
And the fact that he commits to the bits so wholeheartedly, you're in it, man.
And wings.
And the green stuff that Eric Larson brought in, like, oh no, that's actually them secreting their...
Incredible. Yeah, to find out that like all the goop coming out of his mouth, it's like, oh, that's them pooping and peeing. It's like, oh, gross.
Yeah. But it's like this guy has sat there and thought about all these different angles. It's like you said, George, there are so many levels to it where, the surface level, I always look at it and I laugh and I'm like, oh, this is so dumb. It's not, though. It's levels, man.
I also like some of the metafictional commentary that sometimes Donny Cates includes in his book. There's a great issue where, again, Flash Thompson takes over the Venom symbiote and breaks them out of this place full of all these, soldiers. And he makes this comment. It's like, whether you liked it or not, Flash Thompson was a pretty awesome Venom. And he's like telling everybody, he's like, even though Eddie Brock's back in this book, Flash Thompson was a pretty awesome Venom. Because I feel like there was a lot of people that didn't like the Flash Thompson. I, again, personally like the Flash Thompson because you can have Venom be a good guy as long as it's not the same Eddie Brock Venom. Like, that's a bad guy. Like, we've already defined where this person exists in the universe. And I'm okay with sometimes Dr. Doom being on the edge. But, like, Dr. Doom's Dr. Doom at the end. He's got a doom. Venom should Venom in the end. And that's the way
this is the problem with comics, though, is that, like, these characters become beloved. And all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to see my favorite character be the asshole who's, like, eating people at a bus station, who's like setting bombs at courthouses. Like, I don't want to deal with this. It's what happened with Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
What happened with Deadpool, mostly.
Oh, yeah.
It's happened off and on again with Deathstroke. It's happened with Black Adam. But it's just like all these characters that are villains that are so interesting because they're villains. My biggest fear is that it happens with Dr. Doom. But like, this is the problem with, I guess, like, fandoms at large, is like they just kind of glob onto these characters, and then the capitalism part kicks in. They're like, oh, damn, people like these characters. How can we make more books of these characters? Like, well, we can't make them villains, because if they're incredible, successful villains, then the superheroes are all of a sudden irrelevant. So we need to figure out a way to make them evil in a cool way, good in a bad way. And it gets confusing. I think this book does a very good job of threading the needle there, because they set up a villain in this book that ultimately, I'm sorry to spoil for people, ultimately goes nowhere. But man, they bring back the Maker in this book.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
It is very topical because, again, my recommendation later on in the show is going to have the Maker in it too. And what's going on in the Ultimates right now, I think it's the Maker is really super interesting as a bad guy, and he's just super interesting here too.
Can I posit a theory really quick?
Yeah.
You came on my podcast. You came on Shortbox Summary. We talked about Wolverine, Enemy of the State.
Yeah.
And there's one issue where Reed was there, and like Reed was just framed as a dick. Like, it's clear that like Mark Millar does not like Reed Richards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Civil War, he was in full dick mode.
I think you like the Maker because it's like an outlet for all that like Reed Richards is an asshole energy to go where it's like deflected from Reed Richards proper.
Yeah.
And so like every bad attitude about Reed Richards can get channeled into the Maker. The same way that like I think all the teenage bullshit angst about Peter Parker about like, oh man, money's coming up shy this month, I don't know what to do. All that should be pushed onto Miles Morales.
Yeah.
He's like a teenager. He's young. You can get a temp job because you have no job experience. It's fine. Peter Parker can figure out his credit score and like get a bank loan. You know, like he can do things that like Miles Morales can't, because Miles Morales is 19, 17, whatever he is. Doesn't know any better. He's young. He's a kid. He's not supposed to know any better. That's the point. That's why you like the Maker. That
is perfect psychoanalysis of my love and love of the Maker for sure. But we have to get to ratings because we have a movie review later on. So we're going to rate these 12 issues of the Venom, and we're going to get that rating scale from Chad Smith since we don't have JA. So Chad, what are we rating it this week?
We are going to rate it symbiotic relationships. Whether it's sons and fathers, or alien goo and alien goo gods, or alien goo and their human hosts, or
sharks and pilot fish. Yeah.
That's right.
Whales and barnacles. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go first because there's some things we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about, the reveal of, Eddie Brock having a son and his abusive father and the fact that he killed somebody in a drunk driving accident or whatever. Because honestly, I don't know if a lot of that matters. I go back to the whole notion, Eddie Brock's a bad guy, and I don't really need to know a lot about why Eddie Brock's a bad guy unless I'm being told a redemption story, which this is. This is framed as, Eddie Brock's redemption story. And so I will say, as much as I like Donny Cates' writing, and as much as I loved, Cosmic Ghost Rider and the Baby Thanos, and as much as I love, God Country and a lot of other stuff that Donny Cates has written, I didn't really like this. And I didn't really like this because, again, it goes back to my fundamental problem with Venom, which is they just keep on shoving Venom as a hero down my throat. And it just never seems to fit. The guy is super violent. He eats people. He's crazy. He's a crazy monster Spider-Man guy. And I'm fine with that, but that's not heroic. And any way you paint it, whether you have Tom Hardy being so charming and, this will sell books because we like Tom Hardy, that's fine. But no, that works in that particular bubble. And that's it. And the only way that you can make him better is by giving somebody that's even worse. It's kind of like the Carnage thing. That was the only reason why that worked in the 90s, is because we got Carnage. We're Venom can't be the bad guy because there's somebody worse. That doesn't mean that he's still not a bad guy, just because there are worse guys. This is a 2.5. It's well written. It's well drawn. It's just, I can't get behind the concepts, what they're throwing out. It was really hard for me to care about these 12 issues. Chad.
Okay. So I would just tell people to fast forward 10 minutes when we start talking about something that's so bad that it works and it's awesome. after everything Andy just said, because that's where Venom is for me. He's a character that you shouldn't root for, but you do because it's so bad, it's so campy, it's so fun. And there's so many elements that Cates he weaves so many things together, which I didn't realize this was all going on. I'm a Spider-Man guy, but I wasn't reading Venom at the time when this was coming out. You've got Miles, you've got the Maker. He's dipping in and out of the Marvel universe, the best way possible, where if you know about those other books, you know about those other titles, that's value-added stuff. Do you need to know or care about Miles Morales? No, but if you do, hot dog. There's just something masterful about the way that Cates is able to do all this stuff and make me care about a character that I shouldn't want to root for, that I shouldn't want to care about. Even the symbiote itself, where it's like, in my mind, the symbiote is a cool visual. But like, I don't want to root for this symbiote. Like, that's weird. That like big, gooey, oozy. Yeah. Like, that shouldn't be on my list of like, oh, I want this symbiote to succeed here. But you do. And so I won't go as high as a 4, simply because I have some of that thing that Andy has, where it's like, this isn't right. There's something off about this, and I don't like it. But then I do like it because it's really good. And the things that Cates does, he does really well. And we haven't talked about the art. I love Ryan Stegman's art. I think he's another guy that channels that 90s BD energy. Just
100%.
There's so few artists these days that have a style that's recognizable, and Stegman is one of them. I'm always excited to see him on a book. And Ivan Coelho, like, he's on that Fantastic Four book that I love now. Like, I'm coming around to Ivan Coelho. So I'm going to give it a 3.5. You could argue a 4, and I don't think you'd be wrong, but there's something about it that's holding me back. But everything, all the objective boxes, like, was it entertaining? Hell yeah, it was entertaining. Was it something that I wasn't expecting? Absolutely. What the hell is the Maker doing in here? There's Venom dragons. There's so many, like, just weird, awesome things.
There's Vietnam War vets. Well, was the last time you saw one of those?
Like the G.I. Joe guys with symbiotes.
Rex, come on.
Yeah, a guy named Rex. You don't mess around with a guy named Rex.
Not in this economy, no.
Honestly, there's so much fun stuff. So, even though I have misgivings that I can't put my finger on, that's going to bring me down to a 3.5. But I don't know. George, what do you think?
I give it a 3.5 also, but for a different reason than Chad. On your show, I really think about what ratings mean. And so I think a 4 is a book you could hand someone who knows dick about comics, and that they could just, holy crap, you just introduced me to a whole new world. I don't think this book is quite there, because like in the first 12 issues, like I think there's some actually like confusing storytelling. I think that's character like the Maker, it means more if you know who the Maker is. I think you can get by not knowing who the Maker is, just seeing this dude who's like a relative genius with a weird shaped head. I think you understand the story, but like it just doesn't have the impact if you know what's going on. And I think there's like incredibly cool visuals, much like Venom with wings, which is just awesome. Like it made me sick. And then finding out that like Venom was actually like a paramilitary group during the Vietnam War, it's like, wait, what did you just say?
Did you just give me G.I. Joe Venoms? Come on!
Yeah, there's so much cool stuff happening in this book, but I don't think this is like Kingdom Come is a book you can hand to someone who's never read a comic before. Batman Year One is something you can hand to someone who's never read a comic book before. The Dark Knight Returns is something you can hand to someone who's never read a comic book before, but that's kind of cheating just because like if you've made it this far in life, you've probably seen a Batman movie. So like that's doing the work, and then like all of a sudden like this is the sequel to any Batman movie you've seen. But like I don't think this is respectfully Baby's first comic, but like I think this could be Baby's first 10 comics. So I'm gonna give it a 3.5 just because this made me care about Venom in a way I never did before. I was always excited when he showed up in a book, but like everything Andy doesn't like about this book, I really like in this book. I do like that the message is him trying to do better, trying to fix himself. I love the twist in the book where it was like everything was setting up that Eddie was hit by a car as a kid, you know, and it's just like that was the accident that like drove his family into destitution. And it turns out he was a drunk teenager who hit a kid. And like that was actually the thing. I'm like, Damn, that's really good. That was such like a good bait and switch that you did there. I love the interplay between Eddie and the symbiote. I love finding out that Eddie's actually a father and that everything he thought he knew was wrong, because I didn't know shit about Venom and Eddie. So it turns out everything I didn't know was wrong. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm learning the truth now. It's a 35 issue run. There's 2 events that spin out of this. There's Absolute Carnage and The King in Black. I think both those events are pretty fun. I think this is 35 issues. Dude does more in 35 issues with incredible artists than most people get to do in 100 issues. Not that any book goes to 100 issues anymore.
All right. Well, we'll be right back with some other comic book recommendations that we hope aren't your first comic or your last comic. So stay tuned for that.
BCWSupplies.com has everything a comic collector could need. Boards, bags, long boxes, and so much else for our ever so increasing collections. And you can save 10% on your total order by using promo code LCSPOD at checkout. Not only does this take 10% off BCW Supplies' already low prices, but it supports my favorite podcast, The Last Comic Shop. So get all your collecting gear at BCWSupplies.com and save 10% on your order with promo code LCSPOD at checkout. That's LCSPOD at checkout. Happy hunting!
Hey all, I'm Frank. Join me and my friends as we talk about all things geek. Here at Geek Freaks Podcast, we go over the weekly news of everything in geekdom, from movies to TV, video games, and comic books. We also have a growing YouTube community. Join us as we go over everything in your geek life and share in the love of geekdom.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for recommendations. Yes, that time of every single show where we give you other comic books in addition to the Donny Cates run on Venom that you can get in a wide variety of ways, whether it's in a neat collection like, we read today of the first 12 issues, or you can find it in the 12 issues floppies, although issue 3, oh boy, last time I checked, that one's going for a pretty penny. But these are other comic books that you can pick up. And we're going to start off with Chad because I think he's talking about the Venom that I like.
So prior to the show, we were talking about DC's new initiative with those smaller digest-sized books and how awesome they are. And there's a part of me that's like super excited. Those things are getting kids into comics and like they're putting some great stories out there. But at the same time, I want my books embiggened, not smaller, not shrunken down. I want them embiggened. So my recommendation this week is going to be the Venom by David Michelini and Todd McFarlane, the Gallery Edition that contains issues 300, 315 to 317. This is that classic Venom when he was first introduced, and he's stalking around Spider-Man and just their first fights. You get that beautiful Todd McFarlane art that, as I was coming up in the 90s, that was like pinnacle, peak 90s-ish is Todd McFarlane and all the spaghetti spider webs and all that other fun stuff. It just takes me back to some of my favorite times in comic books when Todd McFarlane had a writer to work with. Oh, that was nice too.
Any of those Image guys when they had, although I don't know, Eric Larson wasn't that bad.
No, they all have their charms. But boy, do I wish this also included those Eric Larson stories with the Island.
Oh, yes.
Spider-Man convinces Venom that he wins. Like those are lots of fun too.
All right. Well, now we've got a recommendation from George about the other brand Venom. Brand X Venom. No, I'm kidding. George, what do you got for us this week?
Honestly, like if you've read these first 12 issues, you're already a third of the way through the run, not including big events. Finish this run. We read the first 12 issues. And then immediately after, there's like a War of the Realms tie-in, which is not written by Donny Cates. It's written by Colin Bunn. That tie-in's not super awesome. And it does kind of become like a tie-in fest because it goes into War of the Realms, and there's one issue. Then it's Absolute Carnage, which is an event written by Donny Cates and drawn by Ryan Stegman. But then it goes into Venom Island, which I actually think is legitimately awesome. And then after that, we get Venom Beyond, which is where they kind of close up the Maker storyline, which is like where we thought the Ultimate Universe was going to come back. And then Donny Cates had an unfortunate accident. I think that's why the Ultimate Universe shifted and took a couple more years to come back. And then after that, it's King in Black, which is kind of the end game scenario for the beginning of this Venom run. So if you like Knull, I recommend just sticking this run out. You can skip issues 13, 14, and 15 just because it doesn't fit into the greater Donny Cates, Ryan Stegman architecture of the story they were trying to tell. But everything after this is just straight gas. This book was so good, that's why I am subscribing to the current Venom book, which I also really, really enjoy. Like the Rom V. Al Ewing stuff with art by Brian Hitch, and it's currently Venom Wars happening there. Like, this book made me a Venom fan. And so I just keep going. Just plant the flag at issue 1 and just keep running up that hill.
All right. Well, we've talked about a lot of things on today's program, whether it was the Maker, whether it was, these movie tie-ins and things like that. So my recommendation this week is going to play with all of those toys that we've unboxed today. And that is issue 4 of the Ultimates. That's right.
Just issue 4?
Yes, just issue 4 of the Ultimates. In fact, this issue is so good, you don't even have to have read anything else that's going on in the Ultimates right now. It helps, but this particular issue is a really great standalone issue of Marvel Comics, which just doesn't happen very often anymore. It kind of tells a what-if story that I've wanted to hear for quite some time, which is like, what if, Reed Richards was so disgusted with himself, he's decided to be like, no. Only I can be Reed Richards. Everybody else can't be Reed Richards anymore. They have to be Doom. They have to be something inferior to me. And that's what happens in the Ultimate Universe right now. As a lot of people know, currently in the Jonathan Hickman run of Ultimates, you've got the Reed Richards of that universe walking around in a Dr. Doom costume. And we're all like, why did that happen? Well, issue 4 explains that. It's written by Dennis Camp with art by Phil Noto, and it is truly a dark tale about how the Maker screws up this Reed Richards' life so bad, takes away all of his Fantastic Four, gets him to a place where basically he can just tie him down to a chair and put mutant rats all over him, beat him senselessly, all just to make him admit that he's no longer Reed Richards, that he's Victor Von Doom, that all he's created in his life is doom and misery. And I really do think this is what's going to happen in the Avengers movie from now. Hey, if this doesn't happen, I'll eat my hat. I really feel like there's going to be an alternate universe Tony Stark, tormented and tortured by somebody to the point where he now believes he's Dr. Doom, and he comes to this universe thinking he's Dr. Doom, and that's why he says, I'm Dr. Doom. He's just been tortured to the point where that's all he can believe anymore. And so it'll be a really neat redemption arc for that Tony Stark eventually, when I guess our universe heroes save him or whatever, or maybe it'll be a very tragic tale, who knows. But it'll be an additional layer to that whole Tony Stark, Dr. Doom relationship that's going on. These mice keep dying. All I have to say is that these mice keep dying. Just read issue 4. It's really, really powerful.
My question, what's your favorite Doom story of the year? Is it this, or is it the one-shot by Hickman?
Oh, man.
Sanford Green.
I think the Sanford Green issue still is the best one, just simply because that is actually Victor Von Doom. This is the best Reed Richards story that's been told this year. Ben Grimm kills himself, Sue gets cancer, Johnny Storm dies in the explosion of the rocket, just terrible stuff happens to him. And this guy's really, really broken, so I'll be loving to see how that develops over the next couple of issues.
And to follow up on those serious topics, you said this was a dark tale. In my head, I heard duck tail. Marvel has been making those covers for the past year with all the different Disney characters.
Yeah, what if Minnie Mouse became Captain Marvel?
Yeah. Who are you casting as the Maker from your primary Disney characters?
Manipulative. You know who would make a great Doctor Doom? They should just cast Walt Disney. How about that?
Whoa.
Wasn't expecting that. Well played.
Lordy. But in any case, what we hope you're expecting is our movie review of Venom, and that'll be coming up right after these commercial breaks. Stay tuned.
Will it eat our brains? Let's find out.
Dave,
Liam,
it's a trailer.
Watch It If You Can podcast. Join us for each episode as we create box sets of our favourite films and TV shows.
We go through the cast to see what else they've been in, along with any recommendations.
We pick our favourite characters, performances, moments and highlights from the soundtrack too.
We ask if there's anything to make it better and look at the lasting legacy of our pick.
We have a little fun with our quickfire round, and finally, what else would you like list based on themes from the episode.
Maybe, just maybe, you should watch it if you can.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Veterans Day honors all who have served, but do you know how it started? Originally named Armistice or Truce Day at the end of World War I in 1918, it became Veterans Day after veteran supporters pressured Congress in the 1950s to change the name. Learn more at va.gov and search Veterans Day.
We're back with more Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our movie thing review. I don't know how to... I don't think I ever came up with a name for this. It's not a read pile. It's a movie review. Yeah.
It's our cinematic pairing.
Oh, look at that. Like wine and cheese?
Just wine and cheese. Oh, geez. We had to watch another one of these movies.
You know what, Chad? In recent memory, like, it has been, oh, geez, we got to go see another one of these movies. There have been very few and far between good ones, for sure. And we've got another one on the agenda today. It is Venom, number 3, The Last Dance. It happened. It happened more than a week ago for me. I went and took my kids, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. In fact, I asked them before the show started, I'm like, what are you going to rate it, kids? They're like, what's your rating scale? I said 4. They're like 5. I'm like, okay. I was like, wow. And I'm like, what did you like? Venom Horse? I was like, okay. The soundtrack? Okay. So there you go. That's my kids' reviews. They're 10 and 12, and they absolutely adored this movie.
Respectfully, they like the soundtrack?
They did. My 12-year-old son loved the song, that Last Dance song that they were actually playing in the beginning of the opening credits.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was like jamming. He's like, Dad, can I get this soundtrack? This is great. And I'm just like, okay. All right, dog. You keep barking. I'll feed you. Here you go.
That's impressive. I didn't give a crap about soundtracks when I was 12. Like, I don't think I noticed. And then finally, but that time I was like 15, I was like, man, this music's making me feel ways. And that was like when I was like, oh, I like composers are important. Oh, soundtrack and mood setting and vibe curation's important. A bit ahead of me at 12. That's good job. Good job.
Yeah. And Chad's going to do a good job of giving us the folks that worked on Venom number 3.
So it was written by Tom Hardy and Kelly Marcel. Kelly Marcel was also the director. It starred Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock and Venom. Chiwetel Ejiofor is Strickland, and Juno Temple is Dr. Teddy Payne. Rhys Ifans is Martin. Stephen Graham, Detective Mulligan. Peggy Lou reprises her role as Mrs. Chen. There's a family involved with hippies and a kid named Dash McCloud who plays Leaf.
You also miss Cristo Fernandez, who played Danny Rojas on Ted Lasso.
It was a whole Ted Lasso thing. I was shocked that Juno Temple didn't have the same accent. I'm like, what? What?
Man, maybe she should have. I don't know. We'll talk about that later.
Well, let's talk about one thing for sure. That's the 10-cent synopsis.
Do you guys mind if I bring in a friend to do this?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Frame for the deaths at the end of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Eddie Brock and his symbiote Venom, hey, that's me, are on the run from the world they used to know, we used to know. To make matters worse, an elder god named Knull that was imprisoned by me and my friends has awoken due to Eddie and my special bond. he sends his terrifying xenophagic monster agents to reclaim Eddie and me, so he can escape imprisonment and destroy the universe. Chocolate, French fries,
brains.
I love doing the Venom voice so much. I'm sorry, that's
No, George, that made my day. In fact, I think I enjoyed that in your 10-cent synopsis more than I enjoyed the movie. I get it. This is going to be a road diverging in the woods. You know what? I like the action sequences. I'm not going to lie. In addition to the action sequence, Tom Hardy and Venom were an absolute delight. They're playing off of each other. But I'm going to say this bluntly, and I think I said this about Venom 2, if you go back to earlier in our review of that during Merry Marvel March, when we paired it with Maximum Carnage. Other than the action sequences, I couldn't help but feel this movie was super cheap. Like, it was like a B movie with good effects and a couple good action sequences, but for the most part, it was in a desert, 2 scenes inside of Las Vegas, and at some scrapyard. It just seemed cheap.
I dare say, sir, this movie was not cheap enough. It earns every bit of its 40% Rotten Tomatoes score. But you got Tom Hardy in here, I genuinely think understands the character and understands the fun of this universe. And instead of giving him a budget of like $40 and a good luck, like they should, like the old school Trauma movies, they're giving him all this CGI, Planet of Knulls. Like, those should have been dudes in rubber suits, with the zippers showing. They missed a window just to have more fun with this, because this movie is going to do at the box office what it's going to do at the box office. Whether it cost them $100 million to make or whether it cost $40 and a pack of cigarettes, it's going to get the same results. So you might as well have gone with the cheesy, cheap, funny elements. Other than the Venom horse. I agree, Venom horse, super awesome. All the money for the Venom horse, but everything else should have just been dudes in rubber suits.
I thought this movie was pretty entertaining. Like, granted, I had incredibly low expectations, but it just jumped and leapt, and Venom flew over those expectations. I agree that, like, it looks kind of shitty, especially, like, in the third act fight. I feel like the reason Venom kind of looks shitty in this movie is because they were doing like 19 different Venoms in this movie. Like they had to spread the budget out. The monster itself, the xenophage monster, looked good, but like one of the reasons that it felt so cheap, and it's just interesting because like I don't think Tom Hardy wants to do this anymore. I know you said that he really gets a character. I agree, and I think that's why he like co-wrote the story with Marcel, the director. But like, man, they tease Knull but don't show Knull. Like that felt like the cheap thing, right? Like,
yeah,
Thanos at the end of Avengers, like, never mind, I'll do it myself. But then we still didn't see that dickhead for like 18 movies after that. Like it took a minute for him to like actually show up and do something.
Well, you bring up a good point, George, because there was also kind of another big payoff that they didn't do anything with. Tom Hardy has to get to New York for some reason. Why does he have to get to New York other than to see Spider-Man? Really? Because isn't that where Spider-Man lives? Doesn't he need to get there instead of get like the scene of him looking at Lady Liberty and you're like...
But his logic for wanting to go to New York is like, they think I murdered a bunch of people in San Francisco. I better get away. I don't want to be on the run, though. I'm going to go back to New York, and I'm going to blackmail the person who pushed me out of New York to San Francisco in the first place. Like, that was his plan, which I don't really get.
And I was just going to say, and if you were not going to give us Spider-Man, then I was at least expecting J. Jonah Jameson. I was expecting J. Jonah Jameson to be the person that drove him out of New York to begin with. Let's go full circle. Let's get J. Jonah. Let's get J.K. Simmons in there doing a cameo at the end saying, like, Parker, I need pictures. And saying, hey, Brock, you'll never work in this town again. I told you wouldn't work in this town again. Give me something.
Like, it ties into Spider-Man No Way Home at the beginning. Like, they're talking about the snap. Like, they're talking about Thanos. They're talking about this. And that's because every ancillary Spider-Man character in the movies was pulled into the MCU. I refuse to call it the 616. That's like the one nerd, the hill I will die on. The 616 is something you hold in your hands. But like, they had the connection to the main MCU. And then you're right, they completely botched it at the end. Give me Rocket Racer, Tarantula, give me anything at the end there, just to make it feel a little bit more Spidey.
You didn't like Venom Cockroach?
What does that even mean, man? Like, honestly,
what does that mean?
Like, what does that mean?
Can somebody unpack that? I was like, is that Venom? Did he survive as the cockroach? Like, is that really what they're telling me? Because, like, I didn't get it. All I saw was the person running off.
It's a metaphor, man. It's a metaphor. The xenophages are the cockroaches. You cannot get rid of the cockroaches. Long after we're gone and the apes have taken over, there will still be the cockroaches. Xenophages taking over those cockroaches. So even long after Tom Hardy is gone and cashed out and gone to make decent movies, you're still going to have Sony pumping out Venom movies like the cockroaches they are.
I talked to a buddy who had seen it, and he's just like, yeah, the action scenes were fine, but like the script was atrocious. I'm like, no, the script wasn't really that atrocious. Certain decisions were atrocious. Juno Temple, like her character, man, that was like a lot to cram in for what didn't really feel like a lot of payoff.
Yeah.
Oh, she got struck by lightning, but it killed her brother, who had all these dreams to go work for NASA and go up into space. So she was just living on his dream. Like, I was just like, huh, that's weird. Also, her accent was like legitimately terrible, but in like a charming way. Like, I loved it. But it was also like, you're an astrophysicist, and it sounds like I can hear you thinking about the next word to say. I'm like, that's not a great look for an astrophysicist. There's so much to like. And like, I really enjoyed the conversation he had with that hippie family when he was traveling.
Yeah. In the back of the car, and Venom's like, oh, it could have been like this for us, Eddie.
Do you ever think if we had just settled down and got a family, Eddie? And then you would have been a good father. You knew what to say to that little boy, Eddie.
Yeah. But think of all the people that have slummed it in this franchise throughout 3 movies. And I can't call it a trilogy. This wasn't set out to be a trilogy. But you had Oscar winner Michelle Williams. You had Tom Hardy, who's a legit actor, working as both a writer and acting,
and a symbiote too.
And symbiote, yeah. You have Andy Serkis. You have Woody from Cheers. I go back to the first Venom movie, and when we saw the first Venom movie, however long ago it was like 40 minutes in. I'm like, oh, this is rough. This is long and boring. And then all of a sudden, a switch flipped. And they're just like, we're going to have fun with this. We don't care.
No, I legitimately enjoy that movie. And this is going to come as a shock to you. I think that movie channels like the 2005 era, the pre-MCU comic book craze so well. Like, I think that is the closest connection we have to Punisher, to Fantastic Four, to Elektra. And like, I'm not saying that those are great movies, but like, I would stack this movie, especially the first Venom, I would stack these 3 movies up against Phase 4 MCU for sure. And just be like, okay, they're like at least on the same level of entertaining, and honestly just making me forget that I'm going to die someday for about an hour and a half. That's another thing that is sick about these movies is the run times. I think that's part of the reason these movies are profitable enough that they keep making them. Venom 1 was like an hour 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Venom 2 was an hour 38. This one was an hour 50. God, bring back the sub 2 hour blockbuster, please.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with that. I mean, for a lot of the reasons that as somebody that's, I don't know, cultured and enjoys movies, I couldn't shake the fact that it was cheap. It had some things going for it. Again, I looked at my kids, not only my kids, but there were 2 other kids in the same row as me. And first off, the one kid that was a couple times, he was just like, Dad, I'm so excited to see this. I really love Venom. I love all of them. He was super excited. And at the end, he came up to my kids and he was just like, did you see the Venom horse? That was the best. And I was like, yeah, dude, it was super cool. You had an entire row of kids talking about a Venom horse. I mean, come on. I mean, that's great. And the fact that it was short enough that they didn't get bored. They watched it. They had a kicking soundtrack for young kids. It had good action sequences. It had a kid in trouble. They were like, oh, no, don't hurt the kid. They were getting all worried about the kid. He's like, oh, no, aliens. And then the mom and the dad save him. And he's like, oh, yay. And they started yelling, yay. It's just, as somebody that watches movies, it's like Venom 2. Venom 2 to me felt like a glorified TV show. Like it felt like it was done on the same budget, the same amount of scenes as a TV show.
Forgiving that one because that was a COVID movie. Like that was released in 2021, I think.
Yeah.
So that was clearly affected by the pandemic. This one has fewer excuses.
Right. But it still felt like a TV show thing, and not like a movie, not like a cinematic thing where you go to Vegas, but we don't have the showdown in Vegas. Big budget blockbuster, you should have the action sequences happen in Vegas.
What do you mean? They had a dance scene in Vegas.
Nicolas Cage landed a plane in Vegas. You can't have symbiotes fight xenophages.
Yeah, on like they're in the Paris casino that has like the big Eiffel Tower thing. You couldn't do something like that, please.
The pyramid at Luxor.
We ended up having to go down the road to Joe's junkyard and
for the record, that's not as Area 51. Put some respect on the name, Andy. Second of all, there's no giant acid baths in Vegas, Andy. They need that.
And even with Area 51, George, they gave us the crap version of it. Oh, we're tearing it down. We're dismantling it. So we get, again, the Sanford and Son version of Area 51. Not like spaceships, not like the one...
They went into the G.I. Joe pit where it's 100 feet below the ground level.
As someone who works in advertising and I've had to get creative, whichever producer suggested that is a goddamn genius and probably got a raise because it's like that was really smart, man. You saved us $30 million.
Which they did then use for action sequences, and some good CGI. I thought the CGI wasn't terrible.
I thought it was really interesting how I felt like a monster because my first snap reaction was like, "Oh, well, Eddie should just kill himself." He's the key to unlocking this elder god who is the representation of darkness and plans to snuff out every light in the universe and has the capability of doing that. I don't know. You have to consider it, right? But then Venom ended up sacrificing himself anyway, so whatever. I loved how terrified everyone was of the symbiotes forever, and then at the last thing they're like, "Yep, screw it, break glass, we got to do this now." And it's how everyone the point of the first movie was just how impossible it is to find a donor who matches. They were talking about it like an actual organ donor, and yeah, they're rejecting the symbiote. And oh, it killed him, and that was the impetus of the movie of why Tom Hardy started exploring the company that had the symbiote, all that stuff. And then in this movie they're like, "Nope, screw it, backs against the wall, ball up top, let's do this."
It was like going to Goodwill and being like, "Does that coat fit? Sure, fine, put it on." There you go.
Good enough. Kill your darlings. Sometimes you'll have an idea and you're just yeah, but we gotta do this though. It's actually you don't. You can do literally a billion other things. You work in a creative field. You should know better. I didn't love that.
They kind of sort of dropped the plot about Toxin. I'm really scared of it. And then he's like, "I'm just the Venom grandpa. I will tell you all the good things to do and protect you." What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. See, my biggest problem with this movie was there was no bad guy. It was all underlings, You had those little spider phages or whatever coming around. But there was no big bad that we actually met. Right? It was just Knull standing in a corner somewhere on his planet. Mumbling stuff every now and again.
Also, okay, another confusing point. So Eddie died, and then Venom brought him back. So they created what's called a codex, right? And that's the impetus to unleashing Knull from his prison. There was also 6 other people that died in Area 51 fighting the xenophage, and then the symbiotes brought them back. I'm like, doesn't that mean there's 6 more codices out there for people to deal with?
And and maybe I missed it. Maybe I missed this particular plot hole too. But why did Knull just send one? Why did he only send one to begin with, and then later on he's like, "I'll send a bunch."
Because he was sending them all throughout the galaxy or the universe.
Yeah, but the moment he found, he's like, "I got a hit. I got something."
It's on one planet.
It's time to send 1,000. Let's just do this,
dude. They don't have that kind of budget. They're not going to do it. The problem with this movie is you cannot think about it at all while you're there. You have to take everything as it comes. And I do think they did a good job of establishing the Eddie Venom relationship. Andy's been asking for years for an MCU buddy movie. This is the Sony version of that, right? It's just the buddy with himself because it's an alien symbiote fused to his being.
You can't say that like it's a normal sentence.
Yeah, dude, you've said xenophage so many times. I'm so impressed. I can't.
It's different when I say it in the Venom voice.
You just have to take this movie for the moments. Now, does it have those moments from time to time? Absolutely. Did that kid freak me out? Yeah, he did. There's something off about that kid. I don't know. Did not like that choice.
All right, with that, let's go ahead and get to ratings. We got to wrap up the show. So we're gonna go look at George to give us a 1 out of 4 scale for this particular movie. George, what do you got for Venom: The Last Dance?
Just because I want to hear Chad say it again, how many xenophages out of 4 xenophages would you give this movie?
Oh, all right. Well, we'll start off with Chad. Chad, how many xenophages are you going to give this? See, I even said it. Now you're really on the spot.
Xenophages. I prefer the symbiotes in a can. Just, in the little jar. And keep them down in your science lab. We talk about them and stare at them every now and again and be like, oh, wait, no, I'm going to be a Venom.
Don't condescend my 8th favorite movie of the year, Chad.
Sorry, this is a movie that is meant to be condescended upon, along with. I don't know. I don't understand. But as far as the Venom franchise goes, like I said, with that first one, it was 40 minutes and then something clicked and they're like, okay, we can have fun with this. And the rest of that movie, while I will still say it's not a good movie, please don't think that it's a good movie. It was a fun movie. And then in the second movie, you had lots of fun, lots of scenery chewing. This one, you had that touch of heart between the family moments and, the Eddie and Venom relationship. You got rid of all that girlfriend stuff that was in the way. But it's just a series of moments. It's just, a collection of sketches that I don't think stitches together to make a satisfying movie. But if this were on TV and I sat down and watched, a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there, I'd do that. Am I going to make it an appointment viewing to be like, well, I'm going to have to watch Venom 3 again to pick up all the subtle nuance and symbolism of the Venom cockroach? No. No, I'm not going to do that. It was fun, but it's not good. Like I said, it earned every bit of the 40% of the Rotten Tomatoes that it's gotten. I'm going to give it a 2.33333 repeater.
Okay.
That is so much higher than what I thought we were going to get with that preamble you just gave.
All right. I'm just going to give it a flat out 2. Like, it's an average movie. Like, I have seen much better movies. I have actually also seen movies in which I've wanted to walk out of the theater. Honestly, my favorite part of this movie was seeing it with my kids. I really did enjoy seeing it with kids. So if you have kids that are even remotely interested in comic books or just remotely interested in just fun action sequences, because again, I think as comic book fans, we've gotten away from the fact that like movies can just be movies, right? They can just be movies that you throw on and you're just like, yeah, this is, mindless jazz and I don't have to really think about the plot. And so that's what this is in spades. Is it super cheap? Yeah. Is it doesn't make a lick of sense sometimes? Yeah. But at the same time, like my kids liked it. And so I can't give it like a 1. Like there have been times I've just wanted to walk out and my kids have even wanted to walk out of theaters because they're so bored. Mm-hmm. They didn't get bored. They like the soundtrack, stuff like that. That matters. That matters when you're making a movie to connect with an audience. And so, yeah, I think it was fine. It was an average movie. Do I ever want to see another Venom movie again? No, like I don't. I'm done. I'm done with all of this experiment. I'm glad that that Tom Hardy doesn't want to make anymore.
What if the Venom cockroach fights Spider-Man?
No, I know. No, I don't want Spider-Man to show up now. I don't care. They missed their opportunity. I'm done with it. They're already talking about Sinister Six, and Knull's going to be the big bad in that. I hope that never happens. Nope, that never happens. Just put a nail in this coffin and move on. Make it the last dance. Let's move on with our lives. It's a 2. George?
I give it a 2 as well. Like, I'm honestly, the way Chad was talking about it, I'm like, all right, so he's going to give it like a 1. I'm surprised you gave it above average.
It's fun.
Oh, my bad.
I sat through Eternals. That's terrible.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember
Yes,
Joker, Folly Adieu from like a month ago, where the whole movie was just like, let's be miserable? This was fun. It had a f***ing Venom horse. It had a dance thing with this Chad. It was fun.
All right. 2.5 then. I feel like okay.
You're great.
Okay, I'll give it a 2.5 because I definitely liked it more than Chad. I've been sitting on Joker Folly Adieu, and I definitely like it more than the last time we talked about it. Anyways, this movie checked a lot of boxes for me. I don't go to a Denny's expecting like a Wagyu dry aged steak. I go expecting the best $11 steak I've ever seen on a menu, and this was like an $11 steak. Like, this was meeting expectations. I don't need every movie to change my life. This one didn't change my life. This one gave me something very fun to do after going and watching part of like the Penn State Ohio game at Buffalo Wild Wings earlier that morning. I had a great time. It's not in my top 5 tiers of comic book movies, but also I think it's okay for things to be strictly okay. I think it's okay for things to be mediocre, entertaining, and like I don't even think that like the turn your brain off argument applies here. Like I think it's just like, no, it's cool. I was distracted for an hour and 50 minutes, and that's honestly all I want to do on a Saturday afternoon was kind of be alone with none of my thoughts.
Very good. And that's all the time we had for Last Comic Shop this week. Hope that you come back next week. We've got J.A. will be back for Archer and Armstrong. It's his pick. And you can make sure that you don't miss that show by reviewing and subscribing over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. Perfect place where you can get all of our episodes, evergreen, all these movie/comic book pairings like wine and cheese.
Are we not going to do the 20-minute pairing of the Deadpool movie and the New Mutants Deadpool 3D comic that came out last week? It's in 3Ds, man. 3Ds for Deadpool.
You know what? Another awesome podcast that you should check out is Shortbox Summary. George, tell them where they can find your awesome show every single week.
Literally anywhere that podcasts are available. And you can even pre-order the next episode of Shortbox Summary by looking it up on your preferred podcast service and just hitting that subscribe button.
So listen to The Last Comic Shop, listen to Shortbox Summary. You will never be without awesome comic book talk. Until next week, I was the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith and George from Shortbox Summary, and we hope that you stay safe. Stay hungry. That's right, Eddie.
Chocolate. French fries. A star that's spinning in the sky.
It's in a can of tin, Eddie. In a can of tin.
Major Tom. Where are you, Major Tom?
The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.